Hi, I'm Layla Salvade. Welcome to the Lightstyle interview series. Today we've got Max Lugavere here. Thank you so much for being here.
It's amazing to be here. I'm honored.
Thank you.
This is awesome.
Max is a filmmaker, TV personality, and a rising star in the nutrition space.
I mean, I guess, yeah, that's what it currently says that on my bio. People have referred to me as a rising star in the health space. Although, as a filmmaker, TV personality, it's kind of a surreal thing to be in this world, you know, and to have been embraced by, you know, people in the health space, you know, to the degree that I have been. But you know, it's an honor, and I love it. It's a topic that I've always been incredibly passionate about.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what brought you into this space and this passion.
Well, so my background is as, you know, a filmmaker, and also somebody really interested in science. So when I went to college, I was pre-med, and over the course of that journey, for me, I realized a love of storytelling and creativity. And so I ended up switching my major from a biology major to a double major in film and psychology.
Wow.
And yeah, it's really funny. Like, I think of all this sort of cinematic cliches that I was warned about in college to never ever reproduce. But it's funny because in a way, like in that moment, the sort of Dr. Lugavere sort of evaporated from the future, like some bad 80s like sci-fi flick. But no, but it's cool because you know, I ended up making a film in college about my sort of spiritual leanings at the time. I was really into a writer, philosopher named Jiddu Krishnamurti, and I made a film sort of about, you know, that and reconciling that, you know, the ideas that I was reading about with the lifestyle that I was living in Miami, which was a very fun lifestyle. Miami is an amazing city that I love very much. And so the film was really about reconciling hedonism and spirituality. And that film ended up landing on the desk of the creatives that were building out this new TV network that Al Gore was behind. And the powers that were at that network saw the film, and they hired me to basically be one of the main presenters of the network because they saw in me, I guess ultimately what they were, the kind of person that they were seeking to empower, a one-man band storyteller with a point of view. So I did that for like 6 years, hosting the network, creating content for the network, talking about the broad spectrum of issues that you know, are relevant
today, yeah.
to people our age. You know, that included politics, that included spirituality, technology, health, the environment, things like that. But my interests really were, you know, had always really been about health and how technology is augmenting health. I was really into futurism and the singularity, and I became close with Ray Kurzweil and his, you know, very well versed in his ideas. And then off camera in my private life, I was always very much like putting into practice the research, the nutritional research that I was reading about, you know, in my spare time. So then when I left Current, I was figuring out what my next steps were going to be, the direction that I wanted to go in. I, you know, tried various different creative avenues because, you know, again, like I love creating content, you know, via whichever, you know, means necessary, really. And at that time, in my personal life, my mom started to display signs of what I ultimately would realize was cognitive decline, a kind of memory loss. And I had no experience with cognitive decline, memory loss, anything like that. There was nobody in my family tree that had any kind of neurodegenerative anything that I could sort of look at and use as sort of a framework. So it was a complete mystery to me and my family. And when that started to happen, I was, you know, in between projects, and as my mom's oldest son, I became the guy who accompanied her to all the various hospital visits, and, you know, and we were lucky in that we got to go to, you know, the Cleveland Clinic, Johns Hopkins. And what I experienced with my mom was very much what I like to call diagnose and adios. I experienced what neuroscientist Norman Doidge calls neurological nihilism.
Wow.
And at the same time, I was, you know, becoming more and more obsessed with understanding everything that I could about neurodegenerative disease. And I picked Alzheimer's disease, not because my mom had Alzheimer's disease, but because it's the most common form of dementia. And this is even before my mom was diagnosed with anything called dementia or anything like that. I was just like, if Alzheimer's is the most common form of neurodegenerative disease, there's got to be some insights that I might be able to glean from the primary literature that I could use to maybe help her. But at the same time, I became really interested in how those same insights might help my own cognitive health. And so I became fixated, I became obsessed. I went further and further down the rabbit hole, and I used my position as a influencer, so to speak, having worked in media, been on television, having a verified Twitter account so I could reach out to people, and I knew that people tend to have a credibility bias, that I might be able to access people that others can't. And so I reached out to scientists, and I had this crazy idea of doing a film, through which I could continue to interview and talk to scientists, but then also wrap these insights together in a way that might help me make an impact in the cognitive lives of other people. And so I did a Kickstarter campaign for this film idea, which I call Breadhead, and we're currently in production on that. But aside from being a documentary filmmaker, my passion has always been communicating to people the things that I'm passionate about. And that has been evident for as long as I can remember. In college, again, it was about, sort of bringing people on my journey of trying to discover my connection to transcendence through art. And, and as of a couple of years ago, it's really been about like getting out these sort of ideas. And also, in tandem with that, as somebody who works in media and sees the mediascape from a 30,000 foot point of view, I see that there is a complete knowledge gap in science, and especially where brain health is concerned, and aging and things like that is concerned. But then I also know that media does a really terrible job of conveying these things.
Yeah, absolutely.
This kind of research. So, I know that, in my world, it's all about clicks. It's all about like, what can you do that's going to get the most clicks off of Facebook? And that leads to the media covering science in a way that's often pretty inaccurate, actually, and really sensational and not the truth. And, as somebody who's a lifelong truth seeker, I just became obsessed with like conveying the insight that I was gleaning from the research in a way that's like accurate, responsible, fun, entertaining, but at the end of the day, that's like meaningful and going to help people.
I love the title of this documentary that you're coming out with, Breadhead. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so Breadhead is sort of an entry point for me to get to discuss in the documentary the impact that diet has on brain health. So for a long time, it was not even considered a possibility that diet or any thing that we do in our lives, any environmental input, had any kind of impact on our brain health. The idea of adult neuroplasticity was something that was only discovered in 1998, and so so the documentary really looks at how our diets affect our risk for things like Alzheimer's disease and dementia. And Breadhead, it's called that because few people realize this, but whole wheat bread, which we've been told for decades is like the staple of a healthy breakfast, or meal, for that in that sense, have a sandwich on whole grain bread. Your average slice of whole wheat bread has a higher glycemic index than table sugar, which means that it affects your blood sugar more rapidly than white table sugar that people use to bake desserts with. And it's completely counterintuitive because we look at this grainy brown piece of bread and we're like, wow, that equals health, right? But we live in the midst of an epidemic of blood sugar, and this is evident when you look at the soaring rates of type 2 diabetes and obesity, not only in this country but around the world.
Right.
There's no emerging economy right now that's not struggling with the westernization of the food complex in their country, and that is trickling down to people, and they're being essentially poisoned by these industrial food systems. Yep. wherever you happen to go. And so, it turns out that the brain is very sensitive to chronic elevations of blood sugar, and particularly in the setting of a sedentary lifestyle. Research shows that leisure time physical activity, which is like physical activity for the purposes of fun, is at an all-time low. We are, I don't know if it's a function of technology and the fact that now we have more fun on our smartphones than the real world physical activity could ever compete with.
Yeah.
Or the fact that we've been shoehorned into working desk jobs that are day in and day out routine, and have us sitting at desks.
It's modern day slavery.
It's modern day slavery, yeah. And yet our brains have evolved in a world that was constantly novel.
Yeah.
So we're struggling in many ways, and that's kind of what Breadhead is about. It's also, it gives me the opportunity to talk about the role of gut health in brain health, which is like, our guts, they're a long distance from our brains, but they have a major impact on the way that we think and feel. And so,
everything is connected.
Everything is connected. So in life and in biology,
Absolutely.
Who knew?
Yeah.
And really, so bread gives me the opportunity to talk about gluten, which people are really confused about. I don't know if you've seen that Jimmy Kimmel skit in LA. They basically asked people at the base of Runyon Canyon. I live half the time in LA, so Runyon Canyon is like right in my backyard essentially.
Yeah, I used to run there.
Everybody in LA is like avoiding gluten, but the reality is most people don't know what gluten is or why they avoid it. And so it definitely has like an air of like faddism to it. But the reality is that the research really is coming out by the day, it seems, showing that it's really not something that's good for us.
No.
And while we might, in a perfect environment, be able to withstand insults from this weird protein that no human properly digests, in the context of all of the other things that we're eating that we shouldn't be eating, it presents problems for a broad range of people. So yeah, it gives me the opportunity to talk about all this stuff, which I think is really cool, and it's kind of catchy as well.
Yeah, it's perfect timing.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we met at the Shine event, which was incredible, and you spoke there. And I remember it was so inspiring, you talking about, most people don't know, maybe some do, but you moved from LA back to New York to take care of your mother.
Well, to help.
Yes.
So I'm not a caregiver for my mom, and
Support.
Yeah, I support. I love my mom, and I'm the firstborn. I'm the oldest son. So so I moved back from LA, and in LA, I love LA. I actually just got back. My brain is still, I feel like, on the West Coast, but it's very much a city that makes me feel really comfortable. It's my comfort bubble. I've got a lot of friends there, but I started to feel really anxious being there, especially at a time when there was all this unexplained stuff happening with my mom. So I decided to move back, so now my home base is actually New York, and I spend, I would say, 40% of my time in LA. But yeah, I mean, I'm very lucky. I wouldn't ever claim otherwise. I get to spend time in both cities.
Yeah, and you've got a good tribe here.
Yeah, I've got a good tribe here too.
Which happens to be my tribe, and it's
course.
awesome. Yeah. What would you say was one of your darkest moments?
Man, probably coming to terms with the fact that I had to give up much of my former LA life by moving back to New York. I've realized now in retrospect that I'm able to really do both and to go back and forth. But when I moved back from LA, for me it was sort of it was a big deal. I'd lived in LA for 10 years, and
you're originally from New York.
I'm
right?
from New York, yeah. And I've always, growing up, tried really hard to get out of New York. Most people would love the opportunity to live in New York, if given the opportunity. But for me, it's home. And so I knew, actually, I relate very much to the show 6 Feet Under and Nate's plight. I always knew that for me to sort of find my own sense of self and to be an adult and to self-actualize, I would have to leave the nest. And that's because, like Nate in that show, I don't know if you've ever seen that show, he's the oldest child. He's very close with his mom. It's a very tight-knit family-run business. And so that's kind of like what my upbringing was like. But I knew that for me to really actualize, I had to leave the nest. And I felt very strongly about that. I went, the first chance I got to go to college, I left and I went to Miami for school. And then I was very happy to get to go from Miami straight out to LA. And I lived in LA for 10 years. And coming back to New York felt in a way like a
defeat.
A little bit, yeah, which again, New York is an amazing city, and I've since sort of come to terms with spending more time here, and I'm at peace with it. But yeah, like initially at first, I wasn't really too happy about that idea. But my love for my mom and my obviously, and my brothers and my family overpowered that, and I guess I ended up coming back, and it ended up working out. I mean, I get to travel a lot. I'm pretty constantly on the road, and I still keep a place in LA. So I'm not going to claim that I have it rough, but symbolically, psychologically for me, coming back to New York was a little difficult.
Who would you say is your light hero?
Man, that is a good question. It's like, what corners of my brain, which of the corners of my brain do I need to like reach into to pick out the one answer that I want to present for this question? So many people and works have inspired me. I've always been really inspired by art and music. And I'm working through this like out loud.
That's fine. Yeah, please, let's hear it.
I've always been really inspired by art and film and music, narrative stories. Even though it's weird. Even though I work in the docu space, documentaries and alternative reality television and stuff like that. It's always been for me narrative works. So. Film, like American Beauty was one of those films that really inspired me early on. The musical band Live was one of the most influential forces in my life, actually, oddly enough.
Wow.
Yeah, because they showed me really early on that you can create art that is at once, gives you transmits a sense of transcendence, gives you goosebumps, something that you really love to listen to, but at the end of the day, conveys a message.
It's a unifying language.
Yeah. I mean, it is for sure. Music, it is. But I love media that entertains and inspires a greater vision of life at once, and so. And I find that in all forms of media, actually. I've been kind of obsessed, if you follow me on social media, I've been obsessed with Game of Thrones lately, which I'm late to. I just very recently, streamed like all 6. I
still haven't even watched it. I can't go near it. It's too dark for me.
Yeah, it's dark, but from like a human storytelling, from the perspective of like imagination, it's really breathtaking. It's like incredible to conceive that this entire, literally this universe.
Yeah.
It's a universe. It's like 2 continents worth of stories and families and kingdoms were created in the brain of this one man.
Wow.
And so that inspires me. I mean, like, yes, there's sex, there's violence, there's all that stuff. But if you look at it purely from an imagination standpoint, from a storytelling standpoint, it's like truly a landmark achievement, I think, in terms of storytelling.
Well, there has to be something good about it, obviously, if everybody's so...
Totally, yeah. So, yeah, I'm just inspired by all that stuff. I get goosebumps very easily when I'm consuming art that inspires me, and so that's what compels me to push forward, really.
I love that. I love how you recognize that, the goosebump effect.
Definitely, yeah. There's science behind that actually. People
Really?
that tend to be more open-minded. There's all these different personality metrics that psychologists can measure when doing a personality assessment. So openness is one of them.
Okay.
And people that tend to be more open are more prone to getting goosebumps in response to art. And
Just art or anything that affects like.
well, experience, I guess, a strong feeling of awe and wonder
Okay.
that
Yeah.
manifests as goosebumps. I mean, goosebumps really are sort of a physical manifestation of an emotion,
Right.
you know?
I get them constantly.
Yeah.
It's like.
Me as
wow.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a sign of having an open
Yeah.
mind.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I love it. That's why, I mean, I studied psychology in college, and
Yeah.
it's always been a huge passion of mine.
Wow.
Yeah, I've just always been really interested in the brain, the body, biology, the inner workings, and then psychology. I really, my favorite class in college was abnormal psych, because from that you can learn so much about, the mechanics of thought, which I think it's really fascinating.
Right.
And then applying that to storytelling. Yeah, I mean, it's all so interesting. I'm a life learner. There's just so much insight out there. And the minute I catch wind of like a world that interests me that I know little about, I become just obsessed. And that's kind of how I've approached health. Like health is something that I've become obviously incredibly passionate about. And it's something that now, like, I'm constantly Googling, constantly learning new things, constantly. There's no end really to it. So yeah.
Curiosity is one of the most powerful things, I think.
It is. It absolutely is. I call myself actually a wonder junkie.
I love
It's a
that.
term that I've borrowed from Carl Sagan, who coined it in his novel Contact. And I consider myself one. I'm pretty much addicted to wonder and curiosity, but not in a sort of broad sense. My brain works like a switch. It's very binary. Like either
Well, you're a Gemini.
is that what it is? That might be it actually. Yeah. So like either I'm like, obsessed with something, or I'm not interested at all. At all. Like, for example, sports. I don't even have a casual, cursory knowledge of, like, sports. I could, like, in football, I mean, I've heard that, like, I couldn't tell you what a down was in football. And, like, I went to University of Miami, so I've been explained football a million times, but it's just like, it's in one ear and out the other.
Yeah, same here.
If I'm not interested in something, it's literally, I basically don't even, I have, like, a less than average knowledge about it, but if I am interested in something and passionate about it, then
It borders on obsession.
It is obsession, and
Yeah.
there's no end. There's no end. So it's kind of like, it's interesting. Like I lose sleep over, things that I want to understand and I don't, because I literally I'll be up until 4 a.m. researching on PubMed, for example, with health stuff, like going down endless sort of click holes, and it's I don't know, but I guess I wouldn't have it any other way.
No, passion. It's passion, ultimately. Curiosity, passion is what drives you, and it's what's gotten you to where you are now, With that in mind, how do you wish to shine your light into the world?
I think it's through creating content that inspires a greater vision of life. That's what I feel like the pinnacle moment of any art form really is, like inspiring, your audience to conceiving the world differently. Maybe a world that's healthier, or a world that's more interesting, and that's what I like to do, currently, and that's what I hope to continue doing. And right now it's with health and helping people live a healthier life and to be cognitively healthier, to help people minimize the risk of cognitive aging, things like that. But then also helping them sort of optimize their cognitive function, because really our brains make everything that I've just mentioned possible.
Yeah.
They really do.
Yeah.
Each of us we're heir to the universe's most advanced supercomputer. And everything that inspires me and that makes life good is made possible by the fact that I'm able to, have this seamless symphony of neural processes happening, just below the surface, really. And, and that's something that is facilitated by the things that we eat and the things that we do in our lives. So, helping people sort of understand that link has become really important to me. Aside from health, it's continuing to make content. I like to play music, so maybe doing more of that. But yeah, for me, it's all about storytelling.
Which, I mean, if you guys don't already, you can follow him on Instagram and Snapchat, and there's like daily
Daily updates.
Yes.
Daily updates. Well, I like to share hacks with my followers because, again, there's a huge information and knowledge gap. I mean, there's research that shows that people think that, brain function is a really important thing, yet have largely no idea how to manipulate it.
Yeah.
And so, I was just talking earlier to you about, before we started rolling, about the fact that I literally feel like my brain is still on West Coast time.
Yeah.
So I hope everything that I'm saying makes sense. But
Totally.
But I woke up this morning feeling a bit groggy, and one of the best ways that I like to sort of hack my own consciousness and sort of reset my brain is by taking a really cold shower, an ice cold shower, all the way in a cold setting. Because what that does is it acts as a mild stressor to the body, and that causes a bunch of really interesting neurological changes in the brain, including shooting up the expression of a neurotransmitter called norepinephrine, which is responsible for focus, attention, learning, memory, long-term potentiation, which is like long-term memory, storing memories, in a way that's really secure. And so I did that this morning, and it's like one of the best ways to. I feel like I probably wouldn't be feeling as sharp right now.
It obviously helped.
I hope it
Because you're
helped.
being sharp right now.
Yeah, I hope it helped. But yeah, jet lag is a bitch, and so
It is.
but that's a really potent way. There's that. There's also exposing yourself to really bright light as a way of sort of re-anchoring your body's circadian rhythm, which becomes dysregulated from constant travel. And so, so I like to share all those things on Snapchat, Instagram stories, and doing it in a way that's, I guess, a little fun.
Yeah, it is. There's always an aspect of fun to your stories or snaps.
Sweet.
Yeah. You're, a standing light and really living in your light, but how would you describe a Lightstyle? What does that mean to you?
I think, living in a way, a Lightstyle. Living in a way that's authentic to who you are, not trying to be anybody else, and really living fully in your truth. I think a lot of people these days try to live lives that seem like Instagram profiles,
Yeah.
And an Instagram profile is really like a curated gallery of like the most polished and filtered aspects of your life. But life isn't like that. Life is not an Instagram profile.
Real.
It's raw and real. And I think life is a struggle for many people, for everybody. We age, we get older, we see our loved ones get older, relationships are forged and then they fall apart. It's, there's a lot to be grateful for, but there's also, life I think is hard for a great many people. So being sensitive to that and doing what you can to, when you can, to make life a little bit easier for your neighbor. I think that's a great example. I try to do that with my content, trying to make people healthier, trying to dispel some of the myths about health and expose some of the truths that people aren't privy to. Yeah, and just being kind to one another and sharing your inspiration, and helping to inspire other people. I think that's a really important thing to do. Like we all there's this line, I forget who said it, but you know, your average person lives a life of quiet desperation.
Wow.
And you know, we're a social animal. You know, we evolved to be social, to connect with one another. And you know, if you see somebody that is maybe not having the best day, lonely, reach out, you know.
Yeah.
Lend a helping hand, lend a shoulder. Loneliness actually changes your genetic expression. Not to, you know, get all sciencey in this closing moment, but you know, it's an awful thing to be alone, and you know, and so in that sense, each and every one of us has power, the power to brighten up another person's day, to be that light in another person's day. And so I don't think that we should take that for granted.
That's beautiful. You just pulled some of my heartstrings. And you do that on a daily basis, just even through your social media. So if you guys want to follow him, it's on Snapchat.
Snapchat Max Lugavere, just my name. On Instagram at Max Lugavere. Twitter, I'm Max Lugavere.
Basically,
on Facebook,
Max Lugavere everywhere.
Yeah. You
but we'll put all those handles down.
Ski down the social media slopes. I'm on all the platforms.
Or snowboard.
Yeah, or snowboard.
Whatever is your liking.
Exactly.
Yeah, we'll put them all on the bottom. But
Awesome.
Thank you, Max, so much for being here.
It's been so great. Thank you for having me again. This is such an honor.
Of course. Likewise.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Cheers.
If you guys like this episode of the Lightstyle interview series, please share it with your friends and family, and don't forget to hit subscribe.